and I wanted to kick her. I wanted to kick the nurse. I wanted to punch them. I just kept yelling at them, "Do you have to do this?" And they were like, "Yes, we have to." That's when I realized I want to make a difference, change other people's lives, give hope even for a moment, use my name for good, and change the game I could. So, hey, medillionaires. I am coming to you today with my very first story time. And I really just wanted to share the birth story of my youngest child. I have three children, three very, very different birth stories. And I can later on do all three of them. But for today, I just wanted to discuss my last experience. This is my third and last child, and by far was the most traumatizing of birth stories. His birth, first of all, my pregnancy with him was absolutely crazy. It was definitely a surprise pregnancy, was not planned. We had a boy and a girl. We thought we were finished. God laughed at us and said, "I got more plans for you." And this little boy has been the biggest blessing. He really did bring our family together, and he brought us all closer together. My middle son, who is turning 10 next week, and my daughter, who's 11, it's brought us all closer, and I don't regret it at all. But I found out I was pregnant with him. Towards the end of the pregnancy, the middle went pretty smoothly. Towards the end is when it started getting crazy again. We found out when I was 37 weeks pregnant that he was transverse. He was sideways. He was laying in there sideways. He actually moved around a lot, but for the most part, he liked being sideways. And they freaked out a little bit, and they were like, "We'll give it a week. At the next week, because by that time you're going every week. If by next week he hasn't turned, then we can try to manually turn him, or we can schedule a C-section." And I had already had two natural births. I was not trying to have a C-section, so I went home. I did the whole spinning babies technique, and it worked. By my next appointment, he was head down. Of course, I think he flipped a few times, and I'm pretty darn sure that during labor he was still sideways and eventually flipped, because it was some horrible back labor. So yeah, I went back home and was fine after that to just let labor start naturally. I started doing everything I could to try to get labor to rush, to speed up, taking the, evening primrose oil. I did not do the castor oil. Ever, never, ever, ever would I do that. Not worth it to me. But I did the evening primrose oil. I walked. I ate pineapples. I did all those little things that people tell you will help speed up birth. All it did was give me contractions early on, but it did not onset labor. I mean, it may have in the long run, but not quickly. It's not a quick fix. With all three of my children, I gave birth to them at 39 weeks, so almost 40 weeks, about a week, about a week to 4 days early. Technically not early. I think that they just have my due dates a little bit off, but I woke up at 39 weeks, and I had lost my mucus plug. And I knew that morning that today was going to be the day. It was a super moon coming that night they've been talking about. And, full moons are already more prone to bring on labor because the full moon pulls at the water of the earth. And so, most nurses say that the hospitals are full on full moons. So, so that morning I woke up knowing that I was going to start. I had been having a lot of Braxton Hicks or false labor, so I ignored all my contractions at first, and they were really not consistent. They were all over the place. They would be like a long time away and then short, and then, all over the place. So I went on, and I was already packed up. I always pack up early. I'm ready to go, ready to have this baby. I went to a birthday party of a friend of mine, and this was, like an adult birthday party with the kids and everything. And by the time I got there, my contractions were starting to get a little bit more consistent, but weren't really. And I felt like, yeah, today is going to be the day. I kept telling them, I think I'm already in labor, but it's not serious yet. And I don't remember how many hours went by, but it was a while. I sat at that party for a few hours, and I would just count my contractions. They were all over the place still. They were not consistent, so I was like, okay, I'm not going into the hospital until they're consistent. And then once the food was ready, because they were barbecuing, once the food was ready, I sat down to eat, and I got that overwhelming feeling of nausea, just like I was gonna throw up. And I was like, huh, I recognize this feeling. I always threw up. My other two births, I threw up. I didn't end up throwing up with this one, but I got that feeling like my stomach was so upset that it was coming. And that's when my friend noticed that my contractions were definitely more painful. She was like, "You look like you're in pain. You might want to go ahead and go to the hospital." So then me and my husband left. She had already agreed to take care of my kids, so we were in the perfect place for them. But we left. We got the kids' stuff to go, and we had grabbed my stuff, and by then it was pretty darn obvious that I was in labor. I got to the hospital and they checked me, and I was already dilated to a 5. So they went on and rushed me back. From the time I got to the hospital to the time I gave birth was 3 hours. And that was the shortest period of time I had ever been in a hospital. With my second son, he came in 4 hours after they started the Pitocin because he was induced. But my daughter, I was in that hospital 12 and a half hours. So, yeah, so they sent me back. Okay, so I know from my experience that epidurals do not work on me. And so I had already requested a room with a tub, and I had a midwife, and everything was supposed to be smooth and great, and I was supposed to be able to have the ball and, all these different techniques. And of course, I went into labor while my doctor was in Africa doing missions. And so, or my midwife, sorry. And so I ended up with a different midwife, which I ended up liking her, although she had to get really tough because my labor got a little scary. Oh, and by the way, the hospital didn't have any clean tubs when I got there. So yeah, here I was, and I was progressing fast. Like my body was kicking that baby out. It was time. His eviction notice was served. He's getting out. And I tried the ball. I tried different positions. I did all of this, and nothing was helping the back labor. And when they had me on the monitors, they noticed that his heart rate kept dramatically decreasing. And so they started to speed things up. They came in, they broke my water. I never had one of those Hollywood story water breaking. They always have to break my water. So they came in, they broke my water. They then decided that they were going to start manually stretching me with every contraction because his heart rate was dropping so low that they were either going to have to rush me in to have a C-section to get him out or speed it up. And so that's what she would do for I don't know how long, but she would go in and manually, every time I had a contraction, she'd manually help me speed up. And I wanted to kick her. I wanted to kick the nurse. I wanted to punch them. I just kept yelling at them, "Do you have to do this?" And they were like, "Yes, we have to." I begged for an epidural even though I knew it didn't work. So the anesthesiologist came in and he tried it. And he tried it again. And it wouldn't work. And he was like, "You should get checked out. There's something wrong with your epidural space. I don't know why it's not working." I knew it wasn't going to work, but I was so desperate and so in pain at that point. And my midwife, I'm glad I got her because I started asking for any drug they could give me. And she was like, "At this point, you're too far advanced. The baby will be drowsy or groggy when he's born. So we're just going to, if you agree with me, we'll skip it." And I was like, "Okay, all right, I can do this." And so anyway, we progressed, and I ended up having him. I don't push for very long. It's usually I don't know, a few contractions before I push my babies out. I've heard people say hours of pushing, never that, no. So yeah, he came out, but when he came out, his cord was wrapped around his neck several times, and they were able to get it unwrapped. He was breathing. He had all of, he really didn't have any problems. I believe he had a tiny bit of meconium, but he didn't really inhale it or anything. So I was able to hold my baby immediately. But later on, as I thought about it, I feel like the cord being wrapped around his neck that many times, and the fact that it was such a stressful labor. All labor is stressful, but since it was such a stressful labor, I felt like it created some issues. This is my son that was later on diagnosed with autism, and when you have a child that has been diagnosed with something, you are always going to think if there was something that happened that created that, or if it just was a genetic thing. And so yeah, he's here. He As I look back on the pregnancy and the birth of him, the fact that he was sideways was already showing me, Mom, this one's gonna be different. You're gonna have to parent him differently. But he has taught me in so many ways how to parent my older children in ways that I didn't realize before, because with them, they were 17 months apart. I was in full out survival mode, did not know what I was doing. And I think a lot of people have that. A lot of people say, the oldest child has it the worst because you're still learning, but by the last child, they get away with everything. You're tired, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was my birth story. I guess it wasn't that exciting, but to me it was, because my other two births were simple. I mean, easy, simple, natural births. One was induced, and one came all on her own. Nevertheless, there were no complications. They weren't sideways. They weren't breech. Everything went smoothly. So I hope you enjoy my story. If you like things like this, story time, and you want me to start doing it more on my channel, please click that thumbs up button and leave me a comment. I'd love to get feedback, because this is what I'm doing it for. I'm doing it for the people who are watching. I thank you so much for watching. You don't understand how much I am grateful for having this channel. So thank you once again. Until next time, have a great week.